So on this week's episode of How We Made the Movies, we are looking at the setting in which the characters are actually placed, the environment in which they do their deeds, whether it is the protagonist or the antagonist. This can be a person walking in the middle of a church, someone running in the middle of a street or an alleyway. It might be someone crossing the road. It might be someone getting into a cab or talking to the taxi driver. It might even be someone like myself who's seated in a very wide chair, wondering why he's all alone on this very magnificent seat. But before we get into that, perhaps I need to change my environment. So let's switch. Well, I was supposed to change the environment, which obviously I have, but I see I've got new gear in, but that's not a problem because again it's still Photogenie Studios. Order your match today. Going right into it, we're talking about setting and how the setting of a movie actually affects the overall implications of the characters' behaviors, as well as how the movie is structured and how it actually ends. And I want us to consider one movie which is perhaps the greatest movie of all time by my own standards. You can choose to agree or disagree with that. And this movie is called Inception. Inception is a movie that came out in 2011, and it basically blew people's minds when it came to how it was done. And essentially it is a movie where characters jump into someone's mind and they are trying to influence this person's decision-making process by going from layer to layer of this person's psyche so that they are able to get that decision-making process and understand the in-depth and uttermost mindset of how this person is able to behave. And even as they're doing this, we see that it moves from a very large, grand environment, which is New York City, which folds upon itself, going into a tub of water where people are falling in, going into a corridor which is rotating, going into the last setting, which is basically a house where this person grew into. And we realize that through all these settings, there is a different personality and a different persona of the characters which is seen. So let us take a deep dive and see how setting actually played a part in Inception. So stay tuned and keep it locked with Photogenie Studios. This is how we made the movies.
They say we only use a fraction of our brain's true potential. Now, that's when we're awake. When we're asleep, our mind can do almost anything.
Such as?
Well, imagine you're designing a building, right? You consciously create each aspect. But sometimes it feels like it's almost creating itself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like I'm discovering it.
Genuine inspiration, right? Now, in a dream, our mind continuously does this. We create and perceive our world simultaneously, and our mind does this so well that we don't even know what's happening. That allows us to get right in the middle of that process.
How?
By taking over the creating part. Now, this is where I need you. You create the world of the dream. We bring the subject into that dream, and they fill it with their subconscious.
How could I ever acquire enough detail to make them think that it's reality?
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right? It's only when we wake up that we realize something was actually strange. Let me ask you a question. You never really remember the beginning of a dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
I guess, yeah.
So how did we end up here?
Well, we just came from the,
Think about it, Ariadne. How did you get here? Where are you right now?
We're dreaming?
You're actually in the middle of the workshop right now, sleeping. This is your first lesson in shared dreaming. Stay calm.
So this scene basically introduces us to two main characters, that is Cobbs and Ariane. And essentially what we are seeing in this clip is that Cobbs is basically presenting the grand scheme of things, or rather the stakes that this movie is going to have to achieve so that we are able to come to a satisfying conclusion. Essentially what happens is that Cobbs and Ariane are in a coffee house in one of the streets in Europe, and as they're having their tea, Cobbs asks the question, how did we get here? That's a very interesting device that the director has used. This is Christopher Nolan, so that he's able to help us as the viewers of this movie to understand how do we jump from one scene to another in a movie. Not only does it have implications in the main movie, but it also has implications to us as moviegoers whenever we shift from one setting to another. So let's look at the next scene and how that happens.
You know what I have to do? I have to get back to our children because you left them. Because you left us.
You're wrong.
Not wrong.
You're confused. Our children are here. And you'd like to see their faces again, wouldn't you?
Yes, but I want to see them up above, Mom.
Up above. Listen to yourself. These are our children. Watch. James? Philippa?
Yes, Mom, please. Those aren't my children.
You keep telling yourself that, but you don't believe
No,
it.
I know it.
And what if you're wrong? What if I'm what's real? You keep telling yourself what you know. But what do you believe? What do you feel?
Guilt. I feel guilt, Mom. And no matter what I do, no matter how hopeless I am, no matter how confused, that guilt is always there, reminding me of the truth.
What truth?
That the idea that caused you to question your reality came from me.
You planted the idea in my mind.
What is she talking about?
The reason I knew Inception was possible was because I did it to her first.
Okay, wow, that was such a heavy scene, and it was superbly delivered by Cobbs and Mal in this particular setup. And what the director actually does is that he succinctly presents a contrast of Cobbs in these two scenes that we have seen. The first scene, the first setup, we see Cobbs being in his element. He has control over things. Even when things are exploding, he basically sits calm and allows things to transpire. But right now, as the emotions run high and he's being asked to question his reality, we see him talking about how he's frustrated, how he's angry, how he's mad about how things transpired. And by this, the director helps us to reveal, to get the revelation that indeed Cobbs might not really appear as a protagonist in the movie, but he might also appear as an antagonist, or rather a fluid character, in that he is the one who developed the Inception program so that he could be able to access his wife's mind for the first time. So the setting of the movie, in short, helps us to develop an understanding of who the characters are. This person might be an antagonist, this person might be a protagonist, this person might be somewhere in between. We have heroes and anti-heroes. We've seen this in so many movies which are coming out right now. And essentially what the directors are doing is they are using the setting to define how we are able to interpret these characters. So just as I mentioned, Inception is such an awesome movie. A movie that came out in 2010, not 2011 as I initially mentioned, but it got an Oscar in 2011, so I wasn't so far off. Anyway, find time to watch the movie, look at the settings that have been used by the director, and try to understand how these settings actually affect the characters. And from me to you, till next time, this is how we make the movies from Photogenie Studios. Ciao.
Something, isn't it?
Yes, it is.